Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. What did Mike Tomlin really say about how they're going to handle Justin Fields and Russell Wilson in the quarterback situation? I'm going to play back exactly what he said and then give you in-depth conversation on how the Steelers are handling the quarterback situation, why they weren't in on any of the big wide receivers trades made, and so much more in today's Locked On Steelers podcast. Joined today by Will Graves of the Associated Press. It's the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Make your first $5 bet on FanDuel and you'll get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll get into that later. As I said before, we're rejoined by the man himself, Will Graves from the Associated Press. We had him on last season. We got happy to bring him back on this season. Will, thanks for joining. How you been, man?
Thanks for having me in consideration for this podcast, Chris. I appreciate it.
As always, we're glad to have you. But Will, you're of the AP. You're old school. You got to be to the point, the hard reporting. And I think we need a little bit of that when Mike Tomlin's discussing this quarterback situation, because right before he talks at noon, Tom Pelissero says that it's Russell Wilson. He's going to start. He's the guy to go the whole week. And then all this conjecture spreads across social media before Mike Tomlin even talks. But then when Mike Tomlin talks specifically in the press conference, he was very deliberate about not being too pointed in how he went about describing how they're going to do. So for our audience, Will, I clipped up a couple minutes here and there of the different points Tomlin talked about Russell Wilson. And I want y'all, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And I want y'all to specifically listen to what he said. You'll get our reactions after this. Here was Mike Tomlin in his Tuesday press conference when he was discussing the quarterback situation.
At the quarterback position, like I said last week, we were scheduled for Russ to work in totality. He did that. Over the course of the week, I got comfortable with his ability to display his health. Now it's about, knocking the rust off. He did some of that last week. He is in consideration this week. We'll see where that leads us, man. Both guys at the quarterback position are scheduled to work tomorrow, and we'll just walk it day by day, all geared toward putting ourselves in best position to win the football game.
Questions?
Mike, how do you knock the rust off with Russell short of getting him into a game, and at what point does that decision come?
You knock it off to a degree, just getting an in-helmet perspective on the work. There's one thing to sit in meetings and digest football and be a full participant like he's been, or to be a guy behind the offensive group digesting it from that perspective. But the in-helmet perspective and the reactionary see to do and some of those things, that's what I'm talking about. But there's also a totality of his resume as well that makes you more comfortable than guys with shorter resumes in that regard, in terms of his ability to play ball on a limited amount of exposure. I have that mentality about guys across positions, and we've had that discussion before. Veteran players, there's just comfort that comes with experience in some of those, really sometimes uncomfortable discussions.
When you say that,
We're going to determine that as we get closer to tomorrow. We got some more strategic meetings today, but I'll acknowledge that Russ proved his health last week, man, and we're looking hard at it this week. It is up for consideration.
Mike, what hasn't Justin done, or what does he need to do better? So, you guys are 4-2 to not just name him the starter.
Justin has been really good, and we've been really good at times, but not to be confused with great. Man, this is a competitive league, man. We're trying to position ourselves to be that team. And we got a player with talent who hadn't had an opportunity to play, so we're going to potentially explore those things. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what Justin has done or has not done. Justin has been an asset to us, man. Last week, for example, man, his ability to utilize his legs by design and by ad lib was a significant component of that game. He rushed for 50-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. in game. And so we're appreciative of that. We're appreciative of how he's taking care of the ball. But we're just looking at all the people at our disposal the same way that we do at any position. We acquired, Terrell Edmonds a number of weeks back, who we have a history with. And as soon as we got him up to speed and got comfortable, we started considering ways to utilize his talents. That's what you do in this thing. You better have your foot on the gas at all times. You better look to divide the labor up in the most appropriate way based on who's available to you and healthy. And that's just simply what we're going to do.
Mike, is there a scenario where you utilize both quarterbacks on Sunday night?
Certainly, there's a scenario. There could have been a scenario where that could have occurred last week.
Mike, excuse me if you did say this, but I just want to be clear. Will Russ get first team reps in practice?
I'm sure at some point, but I hadn't decided, who gets the ball first. That sort of minutia has been undecided.
So, Will, I think that Mike Tomlin is doing a really intentional job of not tipping his hand as far as who's definitely going to be the guy. Now, obviously, there's a lean to Russ because he's healthy now. And like he said, they've acquired him. He's a talent that they've acquired that they haven't been able to use. It's something they have to take into consideration. But how do you read how he is handling this situation and how it will play out based off of what you've seen?
Well, I mean, I will say this. You can't compare Terrell Edmonds filling in as in sub packages to your starting quarterback. And I say that with respect for TE. I mean, he's been a good dude, and it's nice to have him back in the room. But he's put himself in a delicate position. I mean, this is the same guy that says stats don't matter, right? They're what did he call them? Stuff when you take the L, that's what you look at, right? Mm-hmm. But Kenny was 4-2 last year, and there was no consideration of going back up. And I understand that because they were in a different situation, but the offense was in the same situation in some ways, especially when it comes to passing the ball, right? Struggling to get the ball downfield, struggling to make plays. But Justin has won. And what did Mike say? We're judged by wins. Well, Justin's won games. And to be honest with you, if they get a knockdown, they bat down a pass on 4th down against the Cowboys.
Yep.
And are we having this conversation? So, look, I understand what he's trying to do, but I mean, to be honest with you, I think we were talking off air. I mean, I really come to like Fields. I think that he's got a higher ceiling in his career ahead of him than Russ does. That doesn't mean he's better than Russ right now. I still think he's in the development part of his career. I wonder, will this curtail that improvement that we've seen the first 6 weeks? But the flip side of that is, look, there's been regression the last couple of weeks. There's been accuracy issues. If he goes back, he's sub 60% the last 2 games. If he's over 70% those 2 games and plays a little crisper, we're not having this conversation. So you might as well take a look. And to be honest with you, when you look at the conference, I don't want to say you can afford to, quote, give a game away, but I also think if you got to start Russ to see what you got, then, you do it in October, not in late December. I mean, that's just kind of how I feel. I don't love it. I understand what he's trying to do, but you can't open that door and not give the ball to Russ at this point, because that would just create a whole level of problems in your quarterback room that you haven't had yet, and this would absolutely exacerbate them.
I agree. You're putting yourself in a tough spot here. Here's the decision that I think the Steelers are at right now. I've done a film room that is going to be up in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by this morning. This is the Wednesday show. We're recording this Tuesday night. I still am writing this piece after this show. But looking at the film, and I said this last week about the Cowboys game, and I think it was even louder with this Raiders game, there are routine passing plays to be made there that are being well designed up by Arthur Smith. Downfield passes into wide open areas, not tight fits, not crazy reads, just simple, hey, they're in cover 2, middle part of the field is open. They're in cover 1, the seam is open. Those are things that Justin Fields isn't hitting or isn't even seeing at this point. In times where he even makes a decent play because he gets a nice check down and they get 4 to 8 yards, but there was a play for 25 yards wide open for the Steelers to take. And the question the Steelers have to ask themselves is, can Russell Wilson, and here's a Mike Tomlinism, do that routine thing routinely? If he can, is that more valuable? So it's a 2-part question. If he can do the routine things routinely as far as reading defense and making standard throws, is that more valuable than the X factor ability that Justin Fields has to scramble out of a play when he's obviously under pressure, make a crazy throw on the run? Because he did make good throws. Like there was a 20-yard pass to Calvin Austin where pressure came up A gap. It was just a bad situation. He rolls out, keeps his eyes downfield, hits Austin. Great play. But the problem is, for every one of those, there were about 3 to 4 of the plays that he didn't make in just proper reading of the defense, pre-alignment, pre-snap to getting the ball out within 3 to 4 seconds. If Russell Wilson can give you that, I have to think the Steelers can look at that and say that's more valuable, because if you do those things, then all of a sudden the defense can't focus on the run game. And then Najee Harris and Jalen, we just saw this week, when you give Najee Harris more than -2 yards to just get started, he's going to be a problem. And I think that that's what the Steelers are wondering themselves. Is Russell Wilson to that level and ready to go?
Right. I mean, look, it's the book on Justin was he had trouble processing, information, right? And we saw some of that during camp. I remember during mini camp, like it was absolutely like as advertised. There has been some progress, but I mean, some of the reasons, to your point, that he's scrambling for 5, 6, 8, 10 yards is because he's not seeing the 5, 6, 8, 10, 15-yard throw in the first 2.5 seconds, right? So, the offense changes. I mean, I think I asked Mike, how does the offense change with Russ in there? And he goes, so that's the cute part of this, or whatever he said. And but the flip side of this is, we don't know what we have in Russ. I mean, we just don't. We saw one drive in the preseason, right? We saw one drive. I can say that in practice, a couple of throws have impressed me, but a lot of times there's sort of what we talked about, like that has developed in the late stage Russ, where he holds on to the ball and he runs around for 5 seconds. In the game, it's a sack or a throwaway, but he runs around in 5 seconds in practice and makes the play. But when there's live bullets, you're not going to have that luxury. So my fear is, if I'm a Steeler fan, is that the offense starts to look like it looked in late stage Ben, where you got a quarterback that just wants to get it out of his hands and not get hit and hope that your playmakers can make a play. However, there's concerns, 7 different starting offensive line group in as many weeks. But have we seen enough of the passing offense to think that it could be competitive in a true shootout with a team that you might get in a shootout with, like a Baltimore, or or like a Kansas City, or if you get to the playoffs and face a Buffalo or whatever?
Right.
They are not at that level yet. They're not. And if Russ gives a league average offense, I mean, I'm talking to going from 28th to 15th in yards.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes them probably a more dangerous team than the team that we've seen, which has been good. But to Mike's point, I mean, I think the truest thing that he said today was, we've been good, but we haven't been great, and they want to be great. And I actually, I mean, to be honest with you, while I disagree with the decision on the whole, I have to respect that part of it, because you can't look at what Justin has done and said, well, this is Jaden Daniels level greatness here. It's not.
It's not, right. And to your point, I think the Steelers, obviously aren't hitting where they want to be on offense. They do rank 13th in total yards, and I think they rank like 18th in points scored, but that's heavily boosted by a 32-point win over the Raiders. That was boosted also by some turnovers in opportune situations. I think that's what the Steelers have to identify. What is the more important thing that's going to lead to more points in regular situations, in design situations, not just in crazy X factor moments, which are awesome. Like Justin Fields, that first touchdown run, the Raiders had everything covered. They were in position. It's just that Justin Fields is so fast, he made it not matter. And to me, that's the question you have. Are those plays more important than the plays that you think Russell Wilson could make in routine play? That's going to lead to the decision. I think that's going to determine a lot in these upcoming practices this week. Or maybe Mike Tomlin's playing us, and he knows that he will be starting already on Sunday night against the Jets. Certainly, that is a possibility, but we will keep you up to date with that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. The week goes on. That was a long first segment, but we have a lot still to talk about. There were 2 major wide receivers dealt in the AFC that a lot of people are complaining about. Why weren't the Steelers in on these moves, considering their wide receiver needs? We'll talk about those moves next here with Will Graves here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Will Graves, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks is just you against the numbers. Instead of battling through thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the new fun daily fantasy game everyone needs to start playing. It's also the only real money daily fantasy game where injury insurance is taken into play. For example, if you have a lineup and someone gets injured in the first half of the game and doesn't return, Prize Picks will keep your lineup alive. And now Prize Picks, you can also win up to 100 times your money with as little as making 4 correct picks. Prize Picks includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, and college sports. So much to enjoy. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. When you do, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's code LockedOnNFL to receive a $50 bonus for just playing $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Will Graves of the Associated Press. Will, some big moves were made in the NFL and the trade market when it came to big-name wide receivers, and none of them involved the Steelers. And, of course, panic set Steelers Twitter ablaze. First, of course, was the big move that people were talking about the Steelers being invested in getting this guy, Davante Adams. He goes from the Raiders to the Jets. Not a shocker. We said on the Thursday episode with our Locked On Raiders guy, Keont Myers, who covers the Raiders, that the Steelers were not favorites to get him. And lo and behold, that's what happens. He's given up for a conditional 3rd-round pick that could become a 2nd-round pick. I'm not sure the details of what the condition is there. But then another move was made. Amari Cooper from the Browns being traded to the Bills in a pick swap. The Bills give up the Browns give up a 6th-round pick along with Amari Cooper, while the Bills give them a 3rd and a 7th-round pick, essentially going from a 7th to a 6th and giving up a 3rd to get Amari Cooper. Now, Will, I said this on Twitter. If you think that the Steelers were actually going to ever get Amari Cooper from the Browns, you're drunk, you're high, get out of here.
No.
No,
I agreed. Yeah, no chance.
No chance that was ever happening. They're not dealing him. And unless it's like a 3 first-round picks, like, hey, we're robbing you blind to give you this guy, and the Steelers wouldn't do that. So take that out of your mind. But Davante Adams is the one that Steelers fans are freaking out about. But at the same time, Davante Adams is none of the money was absorbed by the Raiders. So the Jets got to do some work there. I'm not sure what they have done or anything like that. But to me, I said from all along, I didn't feel like this was the move the Steelers were going to make, much like I said about Brandon Ayuk, despite their needs at wide receiver. What say you about how these situations have played out?
I mean, neither one is surprising. Like the Steelers, I don't know if this is news to the fan base. They do not have right of first refusal on every player that becomes available on the market.
Agreed.
Okay. I think what the Jets gave up for Adams is not a lot. I mean, I think a 3rd that only becomes
True.
like a 2nd if he becomes literally an all-pro, which is not going to happen this year because of the time that he's missed. You'd like to see him. The money's not guaranteed the next 2 years, so they could kind of get out of it. But to me, what would help if they could throw the ball to Pat Freiermuth a little more. Maybe we wouldn't be so worried about who the 2nd receiver is. That is my big takeaway from all of this. If you beat the Jets on Sunday night, it doesn't matter if they got Davante Adams because you're going to have that tiebreaker with them if it comes down to it in the end, right? So it's not the Cooper thing. I mean, I think that helps the Bills. The Bills certainly look like they need some help at receiver, right? And I think that certainly gives them a stud. And it also says the Browns have waved the white flag on their season 6 weeks in, which is even a little early than I anticipated them getting there. But that being said, as far as it goes with the Steelers, I'm not surprised. I just didn't expect, to your point, I wasn't big on the Ayuk thing either because I just think he wasn't worth the money for what you get in return.
Right.
And Davante's 31, he, hadn't played much. We don't know what his production level would be like with somebody that's not Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers, right? So we literally don't know, right? So that's a gamble there. I'm fine with them not taking it. I'd rather see them, and I know you're going to bring this up, utilize the assets that they have maybe in a better fashion, and maybe that's what Russ helps open up.
Yeah, I think that's what you're hoping Russell Wilson can do. And as again, I'll illuminate in my film study, Calvin Austin, outside of Van Jefferson, who also is getting open, and Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington, Calvin Austin is getting really open. And I mean wide open, to the point where if the ball can get to him in stride in his routes in, again, routine situations, it changes the Steelers' offense because his speed can be dynamic in those plays to not just get the 10 or 20 yards that come with through the air, but to get serious yards after the catch, because we've seen what he can do when that happens. I think it was the Chargers game that he broke open for a big one. That's what the Steelers, I think, are leaning on, is that, hey, everyone wants the Steelers to go out and get McDonald's. Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan are saying, we got McDonald's at home. We don't need to do that. Now, granted, the McDonald's at home is probably leftover spaghetti. So that's Calvin Austin and Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. But there's nothing wrong with leftover spaghetti when it gets the job done.
Your stomach still gets full either way, right?
And I think that's their point, is there is a lot left on the table with the Steelers playmakers right now than people realize. And that's more of what I want to illustrate with my film room study on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Go to post-gazette.com to read that. Should be up by the time you're watching or listening to this. But if you're looking at the things that the Steelers didn't do, we've asked time and time again, Mike Tomlin, do you feel comfortable with what the Steelers receivers are doing with your receivers room? He has never once flinched to say, yeah, we might need some help there. And granted, that's what the coach isn't supposed to do, right? You're not supposed to, talk bad about your team or admit deficiencies like that. But I truly do think that there are parts of this offense that are making them say, hey, this amalgam of players, this group of guys, they aren't the big problem here. There's execution to be made, and there's no reason to sell the farm to go get a Davante Adams when other teams are willing to do so. And selling the farm isn't just picks that I'm talking about here. We're also talking about the money it would take to tie him up with the Steelers in this situation, which, I think if there's a different situation, like let's say Cortland Sutton somehow becomes available, or DK Metcalf, and you can work out a financial situation there, those are completely different scenarios. But between Ayuk, Adams, and definitely Cooper, I just didn't see it happening.
Well, I mean, to me, there's another thing at play here too, right? You got a third-year guy in 14 that if he had to cede his spot as the alpha dog in the room, how's he going to react to that? Okay, I mean, people could say, well, he's going to get more one-on-one coverage and maybe he's going to get open more. I don't know. I think this is a guy that's really worried about, he wants real McDonald's. He doesn't want McDonald's at home. He wants the kind of money where he can go and get real McDonald's, right? So I always think that's part of it. I mean, you can't, but maybe they would have gotten Davante, and Davante would have gotten George on the right path. I mean, Davante looks like he's been nothing but a pro from the day that he got in the league, right?
Very true.
But I think, and it was the same thing with Ayuk, like if they had traded for Ayuk, you're telling George, we're not going to pay you in 2 years. That's what you're telling him. Okay. Yep. And I think that with Adams, with his age, I don't think that's maybe quite the same threat. But I think, look, they seem to be very intent on doing what they can to keep George happy. I mean, what they did at the end of the Raider game reminded me of that Jags game 10 years ago where AB had his 5 for 50 streak and they threw a pass with like 45 seconds left just so we keep that streak that somebody on the staff, shout out Ryan Scarpino, actually created. That stat didn't even exist.
It's true. Scarps he did put that out there.
Yes, the streak did not even exist. I mean, that didn't exist until Scarp said, oh, he's done this like 28 games in a row or whatever it was. So, if they want to keep George Pickens happy, I think he's got to be the lead dog, right? I just think he does. But to your point, if Russ reads the field a little better, gets the ball in places that it hasn't been going, to me, like it's not even spaghetti, it's SpaghettiOs at this point, what they're getting. I mean, it's got to be better. It's got to be a higher quality.
Agreed.
But then again, like they can only control when the ball comes to them, right? And if it's not coming to them, then is it Calvin's fault that he's not being found wide open in the middle of the field? I mean, there was Orlovsky was showing video today, and I'm like, our buddy Alan Saunders was pointing out in the media room, and there's Connor Hayward standing in the middle of the end zone with nobody within 5 yards either way, and Justin doesn't see him, right?
Yeah.
So do I think that they're not I don't think that group would stack up if you took those, if you take Freiermuth out and you take just the receivers and you line them up with the guys that are trying to catch in the AFC. Do you think that group is better than most of the teams are trying to catch? I mean, the answer is no.
No.
So I do think that, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable. And I think that Russ has got to find a way. If Russ wants to keep that job, if he can unlock, Van Jefferson or to Calvin, to your point, or to Scotty Miller, who I think could actually be maybe somebody that isn't getting the ball enough, or even Roman Wilson, who apparently is alive. Mm-hmm. So, apparently. So there are opportunities there, but I also, to your point, I think a lot of it is more the quarterback situation is as culpable as this lack of production as it is the receivers themselves.
Agreed entirely there. We'll have more on that as things develop. I still wouldn't remove the Steelers from being open to trading for someone. I just didn't think any of these three guys who've been talked about, Ayuk, Adams, or Cooper, would be the guy. We'll keep our eyes on that as the season rolls along. I want to talk to Will about some of the guys on defense, specifically how Tomlin talked about some of the guys on defense, because for all the moves the Steelers did make, they added to this defense with a lot of free agents, and I think that they're seeing good results from them. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Will Graves, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel because they are America's #1 sportsbook, and we give you some big numbers to start out the week. This week, the Steelers are 1.5-point home dogs to the New York Jets this Sunday night, as the Jets are sitting with a money line of -124, the Steelers plus 106. The over-under is set at 38.5 points. Also, in the AFC North, a big showdown between the Bengals and the Browns. That moved up by a whole point after the trade of Amari Cooper. The Bengals are now 6.5-point road favorites. They were 5.5 points. Meanwhile, the Ravens are still 3.5-point road favorites over the Buccaneers. Both huge games in the division and huge bets that you can make on FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You can get started today and with a $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you make your first $5 or more bet today on FanDuel. That's $200 of free bets to new customers when you bet just $5 only on FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Will Graves of the Associated Press. Will, let's talk about this defense. I asked Mike Tomlin this. I didn't clip this up because we had a lot of other things to do, but I asked Mike Tomlin about Patrick Queen's play, and I thought it was very illuminating what he said about Patrick Queen, and then roped in other additions they've made through a free agency to this defense. Here was his response when I said, how would you evaluate Patrick Queen? He said, quote, "Man, I love the trajectory of Patrick Queen and what he's doing for us. I think he gets better with every day. I think he gets more comfortable with what we're asking him to do and his role within our ball. I'm equally as fired up about him as I mentioned the other two guys a little bit earlier, DeShon Elliott and Donte Jackson. We've got some new guys to us, but they're not new to the National Football League and that are doing a really good job of contributing to our efforts. Dean Lowry less significantly, but we just got a lot of new guys. They've done a nice job of assimilating into our culture and putting their hand in the pile." Will, a big complaint that I've heard from a lot of Steelers fans in the opening month of play was that Patrick Queen wasn't making enough splash. And I agree. He hasn't made a whole lot of splash. I thought he made a little bit on Sunday. He could have had an interception if TJ Watt didn't bat down a pass. That's just TJ Watt doing what he does. But I do think that he has figured his way into how this defense is supposed to work. I think DeShon Elliott has really done that. And I also think Donte Jackson, the three of those guys specifically, have been really good additions to be assets to the Steelers where there were liabilities last year.
Yeah, I mean, with Patrick, I mean, I did a thing, a Baltimore radio hit maybe about a week ago. They were kind of asking me for an update. And I kind of said, we're getting to the part of the season where, all right, the newness has got to stop and we've got to just go, it's got to make some plays. And to your point and to the fans' point, I mean, I think we're starting to see that. I think we're starting to see, he's been noticeable sideline to sideline from week one. Okay. I mean, his 6 gets all over the field. But the problem is you want him to be a little more disruptive. I think we're starting to see that. I think it's becoming a little more instinctual as he gets a little more comfortable. And DeShon, I mean, look, the guy is fearless. He's not the biggest dude in the world, and he's out there drilling Brock Bowers, in the middle of a game, and he's making he's noticeable, right? And with Jackson, right. I mean, look, this is the guy when they made the trade with Donte, you thought, well, he's got. I mean, even didn't Mike kind of joke that he was? I don't know if Mike used the word midget, but he kind of used. He was like, he was comparing it with JPJ. He's like, we got JPJ, we got a little person, or I'd have to call it the transcript, but it was basically like with this other guy. I mean, he was sort of like, well, he's a little bit older. How much tread's left on that tire? How effective was he really in Carolina? And he has just found his way around the football. And that's all you can really ask, right? I mean, like and he's been consistent. I mean, look, he's got 3 picks this year. His career high is 4. That was his rookie year, but he's been kind of a guy that's consistently found his way around the ball that hasn't stopped. And look, if JPJ wants to be that shutdown corner and they're going to go elsewhere, and the guy that's covering the other guy that when you go elsewhere is catching the ball too, those are good things. I mean, I think it can't just be all TJ and Cam and Minka all the time. It can't. So I think this is, or Landon at this point, because that guy every week
he's
impresses me with the way that he kind of just balls out. So yeah, just really impressive. They've been quiet, and I mean Patrick obviously a lot of money, but the other 2 guys, like one was, hey, we need to make the money work on a trade. We'll take your guy, and then DeShon sort of has been bouncing around, but really, yeah, you can't help but be impressed by the way that they have sort of, to use a Tomlinism, contribute to the collective.
Absolutely. I think that they've done that, and I said going into the season, like that's all these guys are going to be asked to do. No one has to be Superman. Donte Jackson, he had not good numbers with the Panthers, but why? You look at the last year, he was being the number 1 corner. He was the shutdown guy. He was supposed to take on number 1 receivers. That's not his role. Just like that's not Cameron Sutton's role. It's another guy that I think could be a bigger contributor down the line when he becomes active for the Steelers. But I think that's the thing with all 3 of these guys. Whereas Patrick Queen did cost the Steelers some money to get in free agency, as I think he should have, because he was a good player. He's a guy who you're not asking Patrick Queen to be the foremost big playmaker of this defense. You're asking him to, hey, communicate, keep everyone on the same line, be in the right spaces at the right time to limit the run, limit yards after the catch, help in coverage over the middle, which I think the Steelers have done a pretty good job at so far this season. And when I look at how the Steelers defense has continued to play, DeShon Elliott, also in the same vein, is flying all over the field. They're using him a lot in different spots. Donte Jackson fits that way. And I think that it contributes to what Mike Tomlin said there, the culture that they're part of. They're just getting their job done, man. They're not out here being divas. They're not out here, committing wild penalties. They're sticking their nose in. They're putting their hand in the pile, like you were saying there, using the Tomlinism as he talks about, and contributing to a collective that could be one of the best defenses in the NFL. For most weeks of the season, they have been. A couple things here and there with the Colts and the Cowboys, they weren't. But I think if they are able to consistently get this kind of production and results out of these guys, it's going to help this unit be so much better than we've seen, I'd say, even in the last 3 years.
I mean, look, with Queen, I mean, look, we've all talked to him. I talked to him late in camp, and he wanted to prove that he wasn't what they said he was in Baltimore, that he wasn't just a product of being next to Roquan, right? Like he wanted to be, right. He wasn't just this. And I think that, when the sentence that follows your name says sign the most lucrative free agent contract in the history of the Steelers, right? That means something. That means something to him. But the thing that I noticed the most, maybe we're not getting like, oh my God, sixes all over the place, but doesn't it just feel calmer now?
Yes.
I mean, look, think of the odyssey that this team has been on since Ryan Shazier got hurt. This position, maybe for the first time, and that was 7 years ago now. Like it just feels calm. Like you've got 2 pros in the middle there, and they're going to do their jobs.
Right.
And I think that, and if you can just get professional work from those guys, excellent work, then man, that only helps the other 9 guys on that field do their jobs. And I think that is a very positive step. And I think, there's still some work to be done. I still like this slow start, like TJ talks about warming up to the game. That's obviously been an issue 3 weeks now. That can't keep happening. I wouldn't want to follow behind. I mean, the Jets looked frisky against the Bills, right? And should have won the game if their kicker could make a kick. So let's let's not say this is, this is, I won't say this is a trap game, but I mean, look, this is no easy pickings.
They're not even favored.
So I mean, I think that there's work to be done, but I really think the identity of this defense, no matter who the quarterback is going to be, or the off of this team is going to be the defense is going to lead the way. And you hope the offense can take advantage of opportunities and avoid mistakes. And then maybe at some point in the season become truly explosive. I don't know if that's possible. It's been so long since we've seen a truly explosive offense on a week in, week out basis. 2018, probably the last time we really saw it here. That's a long time ago in NFL years now. But I still think if the defense can just kind of give you under sub 300 yards, a couple of turnovers, I think that they're going to be in and they're going to be in every game.
I agree. And I've said this all along. If the defense can be top 5 in the NFL, which right now I believe they are, I'm trying to get this thing over here to work. But if you look at what they're allowing on average right now, they are number 2 in scoring right now. If you can keep up the pace of allowing on an average 14.3 points per game, that's a lot to ask. But even keep that in the anywhere below like 20 points per game. If you keep that anywhere below 17 points a game.
That's the magic number for sure. That is absolutely the magic number. While
also getting your offense to average closer to 23, 24 points per game. They're averaging 20.7 right now. And if Russell Wilson can give them a consistent boost of through the passing game, if you can get closer to that, then if you're in the middle part of the league and the top of the league in defense, that's exactly where they were when they last won and got to the Super Bowl. Was great defense, middling offense that had some playmaking ability to it. I think that there's potential there for them to be a threat if those two things happen. But again, long way before we get there.
Yeah, but I mean, look, good news today too that Alex Highsmith looks like he's
very true.
Be available on Sunday, which would be excellent. And you hope Herbig's hamstring is not as bad as it looked when he went off the field a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I mean, Cam Sutton is going to be available after week 8. So you hope that maybe that's another bet that you can throw in there that knows what he's doing. Certainly reasons to be optimistic, but again, this is sort of the easy part, like the quote easy part of the schedule, right? I mean, these 2 home games and against teams that are sub 500 right now and have their issues. And then the schedule gets, after that bye, like the varsity ball starts, for lack of a better phrase, right? So, so I take the numbers in the early season based on who they've played with a little grain of salt, although some of the teams like the Broncos have been better than maybe we've thought in some circumstances, right? So like the Falcons have certainly looked, effective and explosive. So you kind of may be lucky that you caught on week 1. So some of these performances have been maybe better than they looked in the moment. But still the stiffer tasks await.
Absolutely. Will, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Always great to have you on. Let people they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Hey, you can follow me at Will Graves AP. Go to apnews.com. That is where you will find all of this stuff from the world's largest news organization. It's maybe, I don't know, not as large as they used to be, but still pretty big though. But shout out to you, Carter. I'm telling you, man. Like I was talking to somebody about, I was talking to a journalism professor today. We were talking about how the job has changed, and I don't know if a dinosaur, but I'm definitely like, I got my hat on for a reason, right? And
you got a full head of hair. Take that hat off, sir. Don't you play? You got more hair than me right now.
It's not bad, but it ain't what it used to be. But like we talked about how versatile the group of journalists coming out these days is, and to see, and I mentioned this last year when I was on, but to see like what you can do, like I cannot do. Like I cannot sit here and host my podcast and make my ad reads and make it sound as natural as you do. I mean, you wear a lot of different hats. You do it really well, and so I'm happy to come on and hopefully not embarrass myself. So I appreciate it.
You're always informative and great on this show. Thank you so much, Will. We will have you back here soon on the Locked On Steelers podcast. He's Will Graves of the Associated Press. I'm Chris Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday through Friday episodes. And again, go to Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I do have a film review on the Steelers passing offense and what's not clicking for Justin Fields that the Steelers might be hoping could click for Russell Wilson. Go to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to get that. Back tomorrow for Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's the Locked On Steelers podcast.